Hey guys, welcome to your instructions for the week. I'm doing this so that I don't have to take time away uh, from meeting with you guys for great arguments in order to give you instructions. So the instructions should stay pretty much the same for the entire week. Um, this slideshow will also have pieces of feedback for you at the end of it that you'll probably want to stick around for at least this first time that you watch the video, or the only time that you watch the video, I'm expecting. Uh, so let's get into it. First of all, remember that presentations begin next Monday. I don't think this should be a surprise to any of you, but just in case it is, then remember it now. So next Monday would be January 29th, and we are going to be going in random order. Just like we are going in random order for the grade arguments, I'm going to be going in random order for these presentations, which means that you need to be ready to go on day one. I will not be collecting anything, although you will have the option of turning in certain things to Canvas if you would like. I will not be collecting anything. Your entire evaluation is based on your presentation. So you need to be ready to go. Remember, this is a summative assignment, and that means that you have to do it to pass the semester. You'll also be able to use this feedback in June when we do our grade arguments. If you're going to be absent on any given day next week or ever, you need to email me beforehand, because if you're on the list to go that day and you don't email me beforehand, then I'm going to take it as you're not ready to go and therefore you're forfeiting your spot. So what do you need to know about what I need to see next week? First of all, I need to see that you're applying your knowledge of your rhetorical situation. That's why for your planning, you were supposed to have done a soapstone. Hopefully you've already done that. If you're still working on that, you probably need to finish that up real quick and get into this, because this is a lot of other work that you need to do. The more thorough you can be with your soapstone, the better, right? Like, go back to those notes that we did in September about what goes into a soapstone and really dig into it, because it will help you make really good, purposeful decisions about what needs to be in your presentation. Second, I expect to see you establishing and arguing for a unique perspective. I don't want to hear any reports on your topic. You're going to need to use information on your topic, but this should not be a report, right? Like, this is you putting together new thoughts about your topic and a new way of answering your question. If it feels like talking points, and what I mean by that is, if it feels like this is just the way that other people would have answered this question anyway, then you're probably not going far enough in terms of having unique thoughts. That's why you have a wide range of sources. That's why you did your murder boards and you were supposed to write, the connections, like new connections between different pieces of information. That's why you worked on your thesis statement to make something hopefully that's new, right? And a thesis statement that has a claim of fact and a claim of value and a claim of policy built upon it. Third, you need to make sure that you're employing those rhetorical basics skills. Like, basics are below things like knowing how to manipulate ethos and pathos and logos, and knowing how to think about your logical structure. Like, this is just language-based stuff, right? Are you able to use clauses and correctly? Are you able to make purposeful decisions with your diction? And are you able to make purposeful decisions with your syntax? All of those things should bring out the more complex aspects of rhetoric, in terms of you being able to balance ethos and pathos and logos, and appeal to your audience, all those kinds of things. Finally, I expect you to integrate the synthesis principles that we went over, that I introduced to you in this unit. So making sure that you are accomplishing the things that in our notes you were told that you need to do. So that's why we did activities like the murder board, and that's why we went over logical structures. All of those are ways to think about how to synthesize new and original ideas. All of this has to be done, and then you need to integrate a piece of media. You have 3 to 5 minutes in order to do that, right? So you have to integrate a piece of media while making sure that you're doing all four of these other things. So I guess technically this would be the last bullet point, but this piece of media needs to be integrated within all of these other things happening. So be careful about that. There are two big things that I learned last Friday from going around and checking in on you guys and handing out those little exit slips to those of you who got them all done. The first thing is that a lot of people wrote policy claims that didn't feel achievable by your audience. So either you need to make sure that if you have a giant policy, something that, somebody in your audience, somebody in our class couldn't accomplish on their own, if you've got something big like that, either you can rewrite your policy to feel more achievable in a way that would lead to that bigger policy, or you need to have a section somewhere in your presentation that takes that policy and makes it actionable for the people in your audience. So make sure that it doesn't feel so big that your audience can't accomplish it. And second of all, you need to make sure that your media is of your own creation. You're not taking somebody else's media and co-opting it into your own. You're you're creating something new for yourself and integrating that into your presentation. For some of you, that will mean that your entire presentation is that piece of media. For others of you, it will mean that your entire presentation circulates around that piece of media, but the piece of media is separate. It's really up to the type of media that you're trying to create. So what does that mean about how you should use your time this week? You need to use it effectively. You get 5 hours this week in class. You want to do as much of that as possible, as much as the work on this project as possible in class so that you aren't creating a bunch of extra work for yourself outside of class. You probably will need to work a little bit outside of class, but hopefully if you're really using your time this week in class, you shouldn't need to do too much outside of class. So appropriate things to do in class would be writing your script and creating your media. That will probably take up a large chunk of your time, I would assume. So, part of that would be making sure that the script that you're writing is integrating the media within your argument, that it's all smooth, that it doesn't feel like two separate things. Here's my media, here's my script, but it all works together. That you're focusing on the logical structure of that argument, looking back at your notes and thinking about, oh my gosh, this is, here's how I can use inductive reasoning and here's how I can use deductive reasoning and thinking about how that's going to look. And then finally, making sure that your in-text citations are part of whatever it is that you're creating so that so that you don't miss those. Second, you can run ideas past your peers and get peer edits later on. This will help you think through things. It will help you find problems within your own work, and it will help your peers also make decisions for their own work. The danger, of course, is getting distracted and using it just as talking time, which you hopefully will not do. Finally, you can use time to practice your presentation, practice that delivery, make sure that it sounds exactly the way that you want, make sure that you're getting the effect that you want, the rhetorical effects that you want, make sure that you fit within that time frame of 3 to 5 minutes so that you don't run over too long. Every day you get a 100-point budget essentially, and I will be keeping an ear on the class as well as checking in from time to time. When I find that things are getting distracting or distractible, I'll be subtracting from that point budget until you have 0 or I start taking points away. So technically you can get 500 additional points this week for the time that you spend in class. The rest of this video is going to be timed right feedback. I really highly recommend that you stick around for that and listen to what I have to say because I've read the timed rights and I think there are some things that will help you with that. So I'm going to tell you, I've split this feedback into 3 parts. The first part is I'm going to go over specific thesis feedback. So this is important for your project as you continue to focus on writing your script and figuring out what your media is going to look like and what's this whole presentation going to look like. So thesis specific feedback will come first, and then I'll give you some generally helpful feedback for your project based on what I saw in the timed rights, where are issues that are arising that will probably also be important for you to address in your presentation. And third, timed right specific feedback. Now, of course, you can just go through and freeze this on the bullet points and take a look at it, but I think that I'm going to say, hopefully, some things that will help you understand what I mean a little bit better. So use this as much or as little as you think you should as we go forward. So thesis specific feedback first. There are several things going on with thesis statements that I think we need to take a stronger look at. First of all, a lot of people, for some reason this time around, wrote thesis statements, or as best I could identify, they were the thesis statements, but they were phrased as questions. You never ever, with an argument, argue through question. Like, you never make your argument a question, right? A thesis should answer a question. It cannot be phrased as a question. That doesn't mean you can't use questions as a rhetorical device, but it does mean that those questions need to be answered in order to be effective. Second, you need to make sure that a complex thesis includes a claim of fact, a claim of value, and a claim of policy. I read so many thesis statements that they worked as thesis statements. They would get the thesis point, but they were not complex. And you're really kind of shooting yourself in the foot in terms of getting those higher evaluations if you set yourself up with a thesis that doesn't imply that deeper type of thought. Third, you need to make sure that you need to be careful of using less complex thesis statements, because what ends up happening is, it's not that if you write a less complex thesis statement, you may not end up writing a decent paper. It's just much less likely, because when you're going off of a less complex thesis statement, your analysis tends to be kind of surface level, it's less complex. And second, it can often lead to a disorganized or kind of a stream of conscious idea spewing that turns into just kind of a list of ideas, one after another after another. You really need to make sure that you start yourself off with a working complex thesis that gives you some direction. If you don't have direction, you end up writing papers that just kind of go all over the place. Fourth, you need to make sure that you have a well-structured thesis that's going to allow you to play around with your logical structure within your argument. A really well-structured thesis will allow you to use any kind of logical structure to back it up. A simple thesis is going to require you to just go straight through it, and it's going to turn into a bit of a list. So if you have a complex thesis, a claim of fact, a claim of value, a claim of policy, you're going to be able to integrate different types of logical structures in order to prove that thesis, because you're proving ideas. You're not just running through a set of facts that you want to prove. Fifth, you need to make sure that you write a thesis that allows you to explore multiple perspectives. So this is especially important in the claim of value, that when you place value upon something, it allows you to say other people may value this in a different way, and it allows you to kind of bring in multiple perspectives in order to bring strength to your own. And then finally, a lot of people are still doing this thing where you kind of set up in an introduction an organizing idea that then you pay off in the conclusion, but in the body, you just kind of you forget about it and drop into kind of student voice again. If you set up a metaphor in the introduction, that metaphor needs to run through and pay off in the conclusion. If you set up a tone in the introduction and then you lose that tone until the conclusion, it's going to read weird. So you have to really establish, like, this is who I am as the speaker, this is my tone, this is a metaphor I'm going to use throughout, and you have to pay it off throughout the paper for consistency. So I'm going to show you 3 examples really quick of how to write a thesis statement that accomplishes all 6 of these things. Well, 5. The 6th one's a little bit broader, but it does accomplish all 6 of these things. I saw a lot of thesis statements that looked like something like this. Space exploration has several factors to consider, like the monetary costs and the societal benefits. Okay, fine. I can see how that's split into 2 different sections. You can use the sources in order to explore those ideas, but it's really going to stay pretty surface level. We're going to talk about monetary costs, probably a couple of aspects of, a couple of perspectives on monetary costs, and the societal benefits, and then a couple of aspects of the societal benefits. Where do we go from that? Sounds a lot like a report to me. A better way to take those ideas and build them into something is to say something like this. A more complex thesis will say, while the costs of space exploration need to be considered, its societal benefits outweigh monetary constraints. Space exploration must therefore be internationally prioritized. Notice that we've got a claim of fact. We have to consider the monetary costs of space exploration. Yes. but then we have this value on top of it. Its societal benefits outweigh monetary constraints, so monetary constraints need to be considered, but we need to put more weight onto the societal benefits, so we're placing value on one thing over another, and then of course we can explore that and why we might do that. And then we have this policy about internationally prioritizing space exploration for the reasons that came, for the claims that came before. We're building towards something, an action that we can take, rather than just exploring, oh, we're going to look at facts here, facts about money, facts about societal benefits. We're going to look at those things and then place value upon those things and come to some kind of conclusion outside of them. If we want to look at a much more elegant or sophisticated way to phrase this more complex thesis, it might look like this. So it says, concerns about the monetary costs of space travel pale in comparison to the benefits it will reap for a global society united by humanity's universal thirst for knowledge. This is really where you're starting to combine the different types of claims, imply the different types of claims, but also move us forward with action that we can take, rather than just saying, well, we're going to look at money and we're going to look at societal benefits. Sure, we're going to look at those kinds of things, but we're going to do stuff with that information. We're going to interpret it in an original way. So make sure that you're getting as close to that as possible in your presentation. This generally helpful feedback is a lot of stuff that I've already gone over with you, so I'll run through the first 6 really quick, and then I've got 4 additional ones. Remember that we've already talked about making sure that we transition between ideas and that we integrate our quotes. Both of those things are tied together. Quote integration is a type of transition that ties your ideas and ties your writing together so that we're not flitting from idea to idea to idea without understanding how they're connected. Third, we need to make sure that we're elaborating on our evidence without summarizing it. We provide context for the evidence. We talk about the function of that piece of evidence. What is it doing within the piece? And finally, how is it applying back to our thesis statement? We need to make sure that we do all 3 of those things. Fourth, we need to make sure that we're writing claims or premises within our thesis statements that need multiple sources to prove. Again, this goes back to what we were talking about on the previous slide. But and then you need to make sure that you're not taking them one at a time, that you can talk about them all together. And this is where logical structures really come in. Like if you write claims that are complex enough to need multiple sources to prove, you should also be able to talk about how those claims relate to each other. And then you can make decisions about the different logical structures that will best show those relationships between your different claims. So think about how to use them. Sixth, make sure that you're using complex knowledge about your rhetorical situation to speak to and connect with your audience, decide who you are as the speaker, understand who your audience is and what they're going to respond to. You can then develop an original voice and tone for your presentation, and then you can match that voice and tone with the purpose of your presentation. So it all feels unified instead of kind of feeling like, oh, this is just a person who wrote some stuff that I'll pay attention to if I feel like it. Here's some new stuff. Make sure that you're not providing too much information that's not found in your sources. This is a research-based project, which means that the vast majority of the evidence that you're using to prove your ideas should come from the sources that you've found. If you have other ideas from outside, connecting ideas from outside, what you know already, don't rely too heavily on those. 8, remember to use your in-text citations. That means that you provide the author's last name in most cases and the location, either paragraph number or page number or a timestamp or something like that. Remember that you're to use those things. Most of you did, but there are a few people who forgot. 9, this should say shorter quotes, not shorter citations, but some of you are using really long quotes. You want to pare down to only the essential information from the quote, which allows you more room for interpretation and evaluation of your source, and instead of just saying, allowing the source to speak for itself. The source should speak to your ideas. It should not be speaking for itself. And finally, I really highly recommend reviewing the clauses lessons so that you're not writing run-on sentences and you're not writing incomplete sentences. That clause lesson will really help you understand how to write a complete sentence every time. Last but not least, timed right specific feedback. So this is feedback that won't help you on your presentation, but it will help you with planning your timed rights and executing timed rights. So first of all, consider using shorter and more focused paragraphs. Don't write these giant long paragraphs that kind of wander around from idea to idea to idea. It's hard to prove anything in that case. Second, save yourself time by using letters for your citations. The AP test will always tell you like source A, source B, source C. Stick to those. It'll just save you time. You don't have to write out the author's last name or anything like that. Third, make sure that you finish. Always take time to write a conclusion, even if you've only got 2 minutes. Don't leave anybody hanging. Make it seem as close to possible that you've accomplished what you tried to accomplish, even if you ran out of time. Write yourself a conclusion. Fourth, make sure that you um, um, you won't get any more than one evidence and commentary point if you don't use at least 3 sources. Doesn't matter how well you use the 2 sources that you do. If it's only clear that you've used one, you're only getting 1 point in evidence and commentary. So always make sure that you do that minimum. I, of course, recommend that you do more than that, but at a minimum of 3, or you won't get higher than 1 point on evidence and commentary. And then finally, your ideas need to build upon each other, which goes back to this thesis stuff, right? You have to write yourself a thesis that allows you to build value upon a claim of fact, build a policy upon those facts and values. If you don't, you end up with these relevant but unconnected thoughts. It just feels like here's a thought and there's a thought and there's a thought. Look what I did. I cited some sources to prove these things, but we're not going in any direction. And then we end up also reading a bunch of essays that feel like lists of ideas. And that is not going to get you higher than a 3 or a 4 in most cases on the final product. I know this was a long video, but I think everything that I said is important. So hopefully you are able to take this stuff and use it in your planning sessions as you go through. Good luck. I look forward to seeing you at your grade conference as well as your presentations next week.